Hello everyone, it's Joseph here, owner and lead educator of Sustain Coffee Company. I am joined with friend and member of the team, Dante Baker. Hello, Dante.
Hello. Hello, Joseph.
How are you today?
Hello, viewers.
So we have met up today because we decided that upon reviewing the podcast and a lot of the content that we've been working on lately and just the things we've been writing and even our just day-to-day coffee conversations, they've been pretty in-depth and not exactly surface level. And the whole reason that we started Sustain was so that we could really focus in on those people who were intimidated by coffee and wanted to have like a way to get into coffee that was not really intimidating, which we realized too that it's been about a year since we've had an in-person coffee class due to the looming situation with the pandemic, which, you know, that's the story of everyone's literal life. But we're kind of back to basics today. Also wanted to revisit just our mission statement kind of ideas that we did in coffee classes a lot, which really speaks to the fact that we're like, oh, we haven't talked about basics in forever. And that's that we're educated by diligence, that we're enthusiasts, not snobs, and encouragers, not antagonizers. So without further ado, let's talk the basics. When we think of coffee, a lot of times we don't think of it as something that has a shelf life or is going to go bad. When we're in the grocery store, we pick up our bag of coffee and don't really think about it much after that, right? And the reality of it is that coffee, while it doesn't necessarily go bad in the typical sense that you might think, it does lose its freshness peak, right? So that's the one issue about going into a grocery store, is that a lot of times you're gonna have a lot harder of a time.
Because all your coffee is already old.
But why? Why is that?
Because they're not using the Rule 15. The Rule 15 is 15 months after it's farmed, 15 days after it's bagged, and 15 minutes after it's ground.
So that's the basic principle that we like to think of when we're talking about coffee freshness. Of course, I say basic principle and would love to emphasize that to you, because today we're using a coffee that's actually more than 15 days off roast, but there are plenty of coffees that have broken this rule in my own mind and have proven us wrong, where we have a coffee that is, 3 months off roast and it still tastes beautiful. But as a general rule, it's a good starting place when picking out a new bag of coffee. The rule of 15 really is important to remember at the grocery store, primarily because a lot of the coffee at the grocery is, well, already ground, or is from roasters that maybe aren't using the most reputable practices. And one of those reputable practices is roast dates. So a lot of times at the grocery, the coffee bags that you see, of course, many grocery stores now, especially specialty grocery stores like Whole Foods or Fresh Market, the likes, will have local roasters that they feature in. But a lot of times the bigger brands of coffee that you're all familiar with will put a best by date on their bag. And the best by date is not the roast date. The roast date is where we get this idea of 15 days after roasted. It's the roaster being honest with you, saying, hey, we roasted this coffee on January 1st, 2020. That's when it hit the bag. And that then when you're at a cafe or you're ordering from them directly that, oh, they were transparent with me. I now know that I'm drinking a coffee that is 4 days off roast or 6 days off roast. And that also helps you be able to understand those exceptions to the rule, right? So you can see a coffee that's 5 weeks off roast that still really tastes good. It's one that is breaking that rule or bending it a bit. Now that we know a little bit more about coffee itself in terms of freshness, let's discuss ratios. Ratios are something that in coffee classes are very easy to become overwhelming and be a bit confusing. But all the ratio is the amount of coffee that you're using multiplied by a set number of water. When making a pour over especially, and really any kind of coffee, we want to use a scale and measure everything in grams. And the reason for that is that we can control that variable to get the most out of our coffee. So the current industry standard sits around 1 to 16 to 1 to 17. So 1 to 16 would be 20 grams of coffee to say 320 grams of water. And all I did there was take the amount of coffee I was using, 20 grams, and just multiply it by the 16, which gives us 320, which is how much water we should use for our coffee. Dante, whenever someone first buys a bag of coffee that is specialty, it's usually around $20, give or take, depending on the roaster. And sometimes that $20 can seem a bit off-putting to the person who's buying their coffee from a grocery store, where they're spending a fraction of that. But why is that, or how is that mitigated whenever we're using a ratio and using our scale and measuring everything out?
Ratio is important because you can get the best bang for your buck when using the right dosages. Think of you going to like your local gas station. You're paying like $1 for coffee. Well, you use your scale. You measure your ratios out. Let's say you're using like 20 grams of coffee. That's about the same price as your dollar gas station coffee.
Right, because then you break it down with just some simple math. So 20 grams of coffee with a $20 bag of coffee would be about $1.17 a cup.
Right.
And then if you break it down further, say you're only using 17 grams of coffee, that goes to $1 a cup. And then about the least amount of dosage that I would say most people would be using, which is 15 grams of coffee, that breaks down to 88 cents of coffee, a cup of coffee. So that's based on a $20 bag average, and that's just helpful to know why even care about a ratio. And it's because you're trying to take the money that you just spent on this $20 bag of coffee and get the most out of it and be able to enjoy it to its fullness. Right. So in terms of extraction is a term that I really like to use and get into people's minds as quickly as possible because it's very helpful when understanding all of our variables. So you have two types of extraction mainly. You have overextracted and underextracted. Overextracted is what most people think of when they think of coffee, because overextracted is characterized by being bitter, being astringent, and chalky, which is completely undesirable. Then you have the opposite side of things, which is under-extracted, and that's when the coffee is sour or, more simply put, watery. And both of those things occur when brewing coffee and are often really frustrating when someone is first getting into coffee, right? They spend this $20 on their bag of coffee, they brew it, they have all of their gear together and all ready, and then it still tastes bitter to them. And it's usually because of over-extraction. And the thing here that I want to make sure that we're aware of is that there is no such thing as a perfect amount of extraction for any coffee. Every coffee is different, and ultimately it's up to your palate to decide what your extraction preference is. But of course, we want to aim for even extraction across the board so that we're experiencing all the flavors that a coffee has to offer. Thank you guys so much for watching part 1 of Back to Basics, and thanks Dante for helping me talk through that video. A couple of announcements for you guys. One is to check out the podcast. It's CART, that's C-A-R-T. You can find it on all available podcast platforms. That's a show where we're going to be talking about all the basics and also trying to get your voice on the show, so be sure to check that out. Also, don't forget, we sell coffee. Along with retail coffee, we also have a refill program where you can spend $9 and get one of two options, cold coffee or matcha limeade. Both are excellent, so if you live in the Memphis or DeSoto County area, be sure to check that program out. Until next time.